In a cold cell in the heart of Baghdad, Layla sat bound, yet her eyes sparkled with confidence. She was not afraid. Instead, she felt a strange strength. She watched Yasir, the guard, a calm man with guarded eyes. Every movement of his was calculated, a glance, a nod, a soft word. She believed she was the one controlling the game. But in a dark room, a truth appeared that turned everything upside down. Would Layla succeed in her plan? In Layla's cold cell in Baghdad, the grey walls embraced the silence. She was not afraid, rather she felt a strange pride. Her sharp eyes, like a hawk's, followed Yasir, the quiet guard who entered daily with a plate of food. His steps were measured, his gaze reserved. But with her sharp mind, Layla noticed something in his eyes, a hidden tension, perhaps curiosity. She knew her strength was not in the chains that bound her hands, but in her mind and her femininity. From her military training, she had learned that the body could be a weapon, not only for survival, but for control. Every day she tried a new tactic. Sometimes she would slowly remove her jacket when Yasir entered. Other times she would sit in a calculated posture that radiated confidence. At times she spoke in a soft voice, dropping a provocative line. "Is this all your prison has to offer?" And sometimes she ignored him completely, feigning indifference. One night, Layla decided to raise the stakes. She sat on the ground, wearing only a thin shirt despite the cold of the cell. When Yasir entered, she looked at him steadily and whispered, "I'm not used to sleeping alone." Yasir paused for a few seconds, his eyes carrying something new, but he replied in a low voice, "Are you really that cheap?" Layla did not flinch. She answered with a defiant smile, "I know how to get what I want." Yasir left, slamming the door shut. Layla sat alone, replaying his reaction. Had she affected him? Had she cracked part of his armor? She thought she was in control of the game, but something inside her whispered, "Maybe he is the one playing you." Her cell in Baghdad drowned in heavy silence. The damp grey walls reeked of mold, and a faint light slipped through a small opening above. Layla, with her sharp eyes and long black hair tied loosely, sat on the ground in her faded green military jacket. The chains on her wrists did not stop her from showing her confidence. She observed Yasir carefully. He entered daily, his steps deliberate, his eyes carrying a restraint that concealed something deeper. Layla believed her strength lay in her intelligence and presence. From her training, she had learned that the body was not just a tool for survival, but a weapon for dominance. Each day, she tried a new way to break Yasir's composure. Sometimes, she would slowly remove her jacket, deliberately displaying confidence. Sometimes, she spoke softly. "Is this the best you've got?" Other times, she ignored him, pretending not to care. She studied his reactions, searching for a crack in his armor. One evening, she raised the game again. Sitting on the ground in her thin shirt despite the cold, she looked at him steadily when he entered and said softly, "I'm not used to being alone at night." Yasir's eyes carried a new tension. He replied in a low voice, "Do you think I'll fall for this?" Layla did not falter. With a defiant smile, she said, "I know what I want, and you'd be a fool not to understand." He left, slamming the door. Layla sat alone, analyzing every move of his. Had she shaken him? Was she breaking his silence? She thought she was in control, but a small doubt crept into her heart. The next morning, Yasir entered, without the food tray. He said nothing, only gestured for her to follow. She walked behind him down a long corridor, her head held high, thinking she had won another round. But the room they led her into changed everything. It was a cold room with smooth walls and a massive screen covering one side. Images began to appear, Layla on missions, in training, in private moments she thought was secret. Then videos, her moving, speaking, laughing, watching, even in moments she believed were hidden. They had seen it all. Layla froze. She was not playing her game, she was inside theirs. Every tactic, every calculated move of hers was, in their eyes, nothing but naivety. She returned to her cell without a word. Yasir no longer looked at her. His silence was harsher than the chains. That night, Layla sat alone, her eyes filling with tears. But they were not tears of fear, they were tears of truth. She asked herself, would I have done what I did if I had known they would never harm me? She realized they would not touch her, would not look at her with vile intent. They treated her as a prisoner, not as a body. This unsettled her. She had thought her femininity was her weapon, but they had never seen her that way. Days passed, perhaps weeks, in heavy silence. Something inside Layla had broken, but it did not destroy her. Instead, she began to see herself with new eyes. Everything she had learned in her camps, everything she had believed in, suddenly felt hollow. She had thought that strength lay in control, but the truth was slowly revealing itself. Perhaps strength was something else, something she did not yet understand. She returned to her cell in Baghdad, carrying in her heart the weight of truth. The cold, damp, grey walls surrounded her as if pressing against her chest. The faint light from the small opening above seemed to mock her. She sat on the ground, her faded green military jacket clinging to her body, her long black hair falling over her shoulders. She no longer watched the door with the same confidence. Yasir, the quiet guard, no longer looked at her. That deliberate indifference was harsher than the chains binding her hands. Layla tried to make sense of what she had seen in that room, the images, the videos, the moments she thought were hidden. All of it displayed as if she were an open book. She had not been playing her game, she had been a pawn in theirs. Every tactic, every calculated move of hers was in their eyes mere naivety. This unsettled her. She had thought her femininity was a weapon, but they had not seen her that way. They treated her as a prisoner, not as a body to be exploited. That treatment forced her to reconsider everything she had been taught. Days passed, perhaps weeks, in a silence that felt like torment. Layla sat alone, staring at the walls, trying to understand herself. Something inside her had broken, but it did not destroy her. Instead, she began to feel a strange freedom. Everything she had learned in her military camps, everything she had believed about strength and control, suddenly seemed false. She had thought religion was nothing but rituals, that Islam was a closed system that restricted freedom. But she had been wrong. The truth was gradually unfolding. A faint light seeped through a crack in the wall of her heart. One night, a woman entered the cell. She wore a simple white hijab. Her face was calm, and her eyes carried an indescribable kindness. She sat beside Layla and asked gently, "Do you want to know the meaning of prostration?" Layla did not answer, but nodded. The woman spoke in simple yet profound words. Prostration is to God, not to people. It is a submission that frees the soul, not one that binds it. True strength is not in control, but in surrendering to what is higher. Those words pierced Layla's heart like a soft arrow. She did not know how to respond, but something inside her began to stir. That night, after the woman left, Layla sat alone, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, she felt she was not bound only by iron, but by her old thoughts. She asked herself, what was I searching for? She had thought strength lay in seducing Yasir, in breaking his composure. But now she saw that true strength might lie in something deeper. In the days that followed, Layla changed. She no longer tried to use her femininity as a weapon. Instead, she began to observe herself rather than Yasir. She questioned everything she had believed: strength, freedom, the self. She felt something shifting inside her, as if her heart was breathing for the first time. Yasir, meanwhile, remained silent. He would enter, place the food, and leave without a word. But Layla no longer cared about his reaction. She was now in a battle with herself. Those silent moments in the cell felt like a rebirth. Layla had not died. She was reclaiming something she had lost long ago. The truth she had seen in that room, the truth she had heard from the woman in the white hijab, was reshaping her world. Strength was not in defiance, but in understanding the self. Freedom was not in breaking external chains, but in liberating the heart. In Layla's cold cell in Baghdad, the silent moments stretched as though they were years. The grey, damp walls bore the marks of time and isolation. A faint light, slipped through a small opening above, like a shy messenger. Layla sat on the ground, her faded green military jacket clinging to her body, her long black hair falling loosely over her shoulders. Her sharp eyes no longer searched for an opportunity to dominate. Instead, they turned inward, exploring the depths of her own soul. Yassir, the quiet guard, entered each day with measured steps, his eyes deliberately avoiding hers. His reaction no longer mattered to her. She was now on an inner journey, a journey that began with breaking and ended with freedom. The words of the woman in the white hijab echoed in her mind like a recurring melody. Prostration is to God, not to people. It is a submission that frees the soul. These words were not mere sounds. They were keys, unlocking closed doors within her heart. In her military training, she had been taught that strength lay in the body and the mind, that femininity was a weapon for seduction and control. But now she saw that this strength was false, built on lies that had accompanied her all her life. She had thought religion was a chain, a system that restricted freedom. But the woman had shown her its other face, faith as freedom, surrender as the source of true strength. That night, Layla decided to try. Her knees bent, her body trembling from cold and from a fear mingled with curiosity. 2 bows, then a prostration. Her knees were unsteady, her heart not fully ready, but her forehead touched the ground. In that moment, all the lies fell away, the lies about strength, about freedom, about the self. She felt a strange serenity, as though a new world had opened its doors before her. Prostration was not submission to weakness, but victory over the false self. The next morning, the woman in the white hijab entered again. Her calm face, her eyes filled with kindness, radiated hope. She sat beside Layla and asked, "How was your night?" Layla whispered, "I prostrated, and I felt something I have never felt before." The woman smiled and said, "This is the beginning of the path. Strength is not in the body, but in the soul that submits to God." Then she asked Layla, "Do you want anything?" Layla thought for a moment, then said, "I want a white hijab like yours." The woman gave it to her and gently helped her put it on. For the first time in years, Layla did not present herself as an object, but reclaimed herself as dignity. The hijab was not a chain, but a banner of triumph. Days passed, and Layla wore the white hijab. Yassir would enter, place the food, and look at her with astonished eyes. He did not speak, but his gaze carried a new respect. Layla no longer tried to seduce him. Instead, she prayed for him in secret. She read the Quran the woman had given her, reflecting on its words, finding in them answers to questions she had never asked before. She felt herself changing, not only on the outside, but from within. The hijab was not a covering for her hair, but a covering for her heart from falsehood. When the day of her release came, a political deal had been struck. Layla walked out of the prison with her head held high, covered by the white hijab. At the airport, her comrades looked at her in astonishment. Some mocked, some whispered, some avoided her gaze altogether. But Layla smiled, for she had realized something they did not know. The hijab was not an end, but a beginning. A beginning of a new life, where strength lay in faith and freedom in surrender. She knew the road ahead would be long, but she was ready, because she had reclaimed her true self. The cell that had once been a prison had become a school. Yassir, who had once been a guard, had become a witness to transformation, and the woman in the white hijab had been a messenger of truth. Layla, who had entered as a captive, walked out free. This transformation had not been easy, but it was real. In every moment she remembered that prostration, that single moment that had changed everything. After her release from the prison in Baghdad, the outside world seemed strange and unfamiliar. The crowded streets, the loud voices, the bright lights, all of it felt like a dream after long nights in the cold cell. But Layla was no longer the same person who had entered. The white hijab covering her head was a symbol of a profound transformation, not only in appearance, but in spirit and mind. She walked with a new confidence, one that did not rely on outward femininity or military tactics, but on faith flowing from within. At the airport, amid the diverse crowd, her old comrades looked at her with eyes full of astonishment. Some mocked in whispers, "What happened to you? Were you deceived?" Others whispered with false pity, thinking she had lost her mind in prison. Some avoided her gaze altogether. The hijab was a barrier they could not penetrate. But Layla did not care. She smiled, a calm smile, full of serenity. She knew something they did not. The hijab was not the end of her old life, but the beginning of a new one, a life ruled by faith and dignity. When she returned to her homeland, Layla faced a world that had not changed. Friends and family asked her about her experience, expecting tales of military heroism or calculated seduction. But she told them another story, a story of breaking that led to freedom, of a cell that became a school, of a guard who was a silent witness to transformation. She spoke of Yasir with respect, not as an enemy, but as someone who had shown her the meaning of patience and restraint. She spoke of the woman in the white hijab as the one who had lit her path with words simple yet as deep as the sea. Layla remembered those moments in the cell, the calculated glances at Yasir, the gestures she thought were weapons, the sudden revelation in the room with the massive screen. Now she laughed at herself, at that naivete she had mistaken for cleverness. But that breaking had been a blessing, for it had led to the first prostration, to her forehead touching the ground, to the fall of all lies. Now, in her new life, she lived with true strength, strength that did not come from controlling others, but from surrendering to God. The path was not easy. She faced mockery from some friends, complaints from family. But she responded calmly, "I have lost nothing. I have found myself." She began reading religious books, attending mosques, joining activities, helping others. She remembered her tears in the cell, not as tears of fear, but as tears of truth that had saved her. And in every prayer she prayed for Yasir and for the woman in the hijab, grateful to them without their knowing. Today, Layla looked back at the past with forgiving eyes. Captivity had not been a punishment, but an opportunity. The guard had not been an enemy, but a silent teacher. And the hijab, which she had once seen as a chain, had become a symbol of freedom. Her story was a testimony that truth can emerge from the darkest of places, and that true strength lies in surrendering to what is greater. Layla, who had begun as a captive, ended as a witness to the power of faith, and to a beginning that never ends.